everyone, welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek. Now, if there's one thing you should never bet against, it's how low, or even sometimes high, a comic book company will go in order to make money. Comic books, like everything else, is a business. With that in mind, let's talk about Watchmen. Watchmen is the definitive Alan Moore comic, a nihilistic tale written by Moore and drawn by Dave Gibbons. It follows a group of mystery men, the Watchmen, as they investigate the death of one of their own and find a conspiracy that will change the very world they live in. But at every attempt to further explore the story, the book's writer and professional crazy man Alan Moore told DC to bugger off. Then someone at DC realized they owned the characters, and anyway, fuck Alan Moore. A movie was produced, and after the DCNU was put out there and started disappointing people, the powers that be decided they could revisit Watchmen. The book's ending was left intentionally vague, and at least they had the good sense not to touch that. Instead, it was decided to explore the early lives of the characters and the world the Watchmen inhabit. Thus, Before Watchmen was announced. The event was impressive, with 7 miniseries announced and being worked on by such A-list creators as Darwyn Cooke, Jay Lee, Adam Hughes, and J. Michael Straczynski. So the question then becomes, is Before Watchmen worth your time? Well, they've definitely got some A-list creators working on these titles. So we're going to take a look at the first issue of the first 4 miniseries and see if there's something worth reading there. With that in mind, we begin at the beginning. Minutemen #1, written and drawn by Darwyn Cooke. In Watchmen, one of the key pieces of establishing the history of the world was flashbacks by the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason, in his tell-all book, Under the Hood. With Before Watchmen, writer and artist Darwyn Cooke, best known for his definitive Silver Age Justice League story, New Frontier, sets this story shortly before the book's publication. A just-retired Hollis has submitted it to his editor and goes about rereading his initial draft. Wait. So this entire event is essentially one big flashback, but then the first book is a flashback within the flashback. Okay. He starts poring over his work with Chapter 1, the appearance of the first masked vigilante, Hooded Justice. Although already in training to become a mystery man, Hollis is still just a cop at this time and remembers the department chasing a pair of crooks into a factory. Allegedly, Hooded Justice had already destroyed their partners and chased the pair inside when the police arrived. While discussing their options, one of the crooks noticed that his partner has just disappeared. Finally, Hooded Justice shows up, and the man is so scared he wets himself. First Avengers Academy and now Minutemen. Apparently, peeing your pants is the new cool thing in comic books.
If peeing your pants is cool, consider me Miles Davis.
Oh, that was the grossest thing I've ever heard in my life. Let's go!
A few moments later, the police hear screams of terrible pain before the crook gets thrown out of a factory window. The hood then goes through the hood of a car. Hollis is the only one to get a brief glimpse of Cape, the only proof they'll find that Hooded Justice was ever there. After this, Sally Jupiter makes her debut. Her manager Larry seeks to cash in on the superhero fad by having her foil robberies that he sets up using out-of-work actors, publicity-hungry retailers, and crooked cops that he pays off to let her do her thing. We then cut to Night Owl early in his career, skipping over the rookie mistakes that got covered in the original Watchmen. We see a slightly less inexperienced Hollis witness police chasing after an armored car. He ducks into an alley, shedding uniform for costume, while his narration admits to being a hero because he was also a thrill junkie. He manages to put the kibosh on the crooks before diving out of the tumbling car to push a woman and son out of the way of being crushed. We also check in with future rapist and psychopath, the comedian, as he beats up a bartender. Brian Lewis has just invented a fabulous glider suit. However, having suffered numerous injuries during the suit's development, as well as the constant pressure to maintain his physique for the sake of gliding, he's developed a growing dependency on painkillers and alcohol. Dollar Bill, whether a real hero or not, is shown in a commercial telling theatergoers to invest in his sponsor, the National Bank. Finally, Hollis introduces the Silhouette. He shows her, knives in hand, taking down a group of criminals. Having barely escaped Hitler's forces in Austria, she devoted her life to helping children, in this case the victim of child pornographers. Hollis admits to having loved her, despite her being gay. Finally, in an empty factory on the Hudson River with a giant CM on the front, we meet Captain Metropolis, ex-Marine Nelson Gardner, who begins working with Sally's agent to set up the idea of the Minutemen. He sends out invitations inviting the various heroes to work out of his base. And that's all there really is for the first issue of Minutemen, except for a 2-page backup on the Curse of the Crimson Corsair. It's a backup that's going to run through the entire Before Watchmen event, based on that pirate comic the young kid in New York was reading in the original Watchmen. It has to be said, this issue was entirely set up, introducing us to characters that previously had only been minor or even background figures in the original Watchmen mythos. Let's take a closer look at Minutemen number 1. First of all, the art is very clean and stylized in a way that reminds me equally of Tim Sale and Bruce Timm. It lends itself well to both the stylized sense of animation and still manages to project a sense of noir-style setting. From the shadow falling across the crook's face to the domino masks the heroes wear with no eyes showing through. Everything looks very cartoonish, but still manages realism in the same way that Will Eisner did in The Spirit. Essentially, it looks very much like a Batman the Animated episode set in the 40s and painted in sepia tones. So a lot of the book's artistic success has to be shared with artist Phil Noto. Himself a well-known penciler, he took over the coloring duties for this miniseries, and his work is a resounding success. Cook also manages to handle the action sequences with great flair, from the way the bodies just seem to end up flying through the air in silhouette scene, to the balls-to-the-wall action of Night Owl stopping the armed car robbery. The action feels authentic and draws you in. What's smart is that Cook is presenting this all as a read-through of Hollis's book, a plot device that Moore used in his original story. Using that familiar story tool will make previous readers of Watchmen feel at home with Minutemen. We're just reading through the other pages that Moore didn't show us in the original series. Also, what you should remember is that we're not seeing things as how they happened, but rather how Hollis remembers them and then presents them to us in his book. In this story, the Minutemen are humans, and humans are rarely perfect. As I read how he jumped from a tumbling car to save a mother and son from certain death, I was thinking to myself, wow. But in reality, I realized he was probably thrown from the car and landed on them by accident. Through the forgiving eyes of recollection and artistic license, the Minutemen will move flawlessly and perform for us at a near superhuman level. We should never forget that. Now, if there's one thing I didn't like, it's that we don't know where the story is going. Granted, it'll tell the story of the Minutemen's rise and fall, how they eventually start their group, and how it eventually collapses. But this is the first issue. It sets up the storytelling device and introduces all the characters. It just never gives you any idea of what journey they're going to take. Still, everything about Minutemen feels authentic to the period, and story-wise it definitely feels as though we're presenting an accurate look at this era of the Watchmen backstory. Herm. Many questions left, yes? Sorry, Rorschach mode. It's a standard setup issue. The art is fantastic, and the use of a previously established storytelling device from Watchmen makes the whole experience feel genuine to the source material. But I would have at least liked a teaser as to what the Minutemen will be facing in future issues. Am I going to read the whole series? Yes. I give Minutemen number 1 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you for joining me. I'm the Last Angry Geek, and I'll see you next time on Comic Book Issues.